My name is David Reinprecht. I'm a functional nutritionist, biohacker, master personal trainer, and longevity expert. That's actually the new hype because it's not science fiction anymore. I grew up in Austria, a small town, and I actually come from a construction, family. And I work in construction, myself for, in the summer, helping my dad and everything. So I saw firsthand, what's happening in construction. And let me tell you, I've never ever seen a healthy construction worker. Never. They're all drinking beer, smoking cigarettes, eating junk food. Eats a burger, sandwich, or pasta, or pizza, whatever, something like that. I've never seen anybody sitting down with a salad. And the demand is also high. They're always in stress, and then after work they come home, they're tired, they can't even play with the kids and everything. Or, my dad worked, on another project, after work, so I didn't even spend much time with him. My grandpa was also a construction worker. He died in his late 50s on a major heart attack for the same, reasons, drinking, working, smoking, and so on. My dad had a major heart attack too, but he got lucky that my mom found him in the backyard. I used to tell him all the time, stay away from, the processed food, especially he didn't drink too much alcohol or smoke, but he was drinking a lot of the sodas, that are packed with sugar. And in Austria, we eat Wiener Schnitzel. It's like pork, fried in oil. And that combination, fried oil, trans fat, in combination with sugar becomes glue in your arteries. Now, I told him, I said, you're going to have a heart attack one day. And you're like, oh, it's not going to happen to me. And then he got, lucky. All right, so my journey started very early. How did it end up here? I was about 13 years old. That's the time when testosterone's kicking in. You start liking girls. And there was one girl in my class I had a crush on, but I was too shy to go up to her. So I was writing a little love note, and I was planning on giving it to her. But then when I wrote it, I was still too shy. So meantime, I was hiding it under my desk. And sure enough, my classmates exposed me, and gave it to her. And at first, I saw from a distance, she was all happy. Oh, who is it? Who likes me? Who likes me? And when she found out it came from me, she came up with a piece of paper and she goes, did you write this? And I'm all nervous. She goes, well, if you did, come on. You think I'm going to go with you? Look at you. You're fat. And that was the beginning of my career. Because from that moment on, I wanted to learn everything about nutrition. I lost 20 pounds in 2 weeks. I was running every day and eating 1 or 2 apples. I didn't know any better back then, but it worked. And I can't even tell you how many books I read about nutrition, fitness, bodybuilding, you name it. And then in college, it was easy to pick a topic, which of course was nutrition. All right, let's talk about some data to see how shocking it is. So the first time in history, we're the sickest country in the world, and we have the sickest children in the world. In 2024, the year is almost over. We spent $4.7 trillion on healthcare spending. And that's approximately $14,200 per year per person. And the projection for 2028 is $7.5 trillion. That's 20% of our nation's GDP, just to put that in perspective. And here you can see on the left, from the 70s, till 2020, you can see that, chronic diseases, getting up and up. So we're getting sicker and sicker every year. But how is it possible? Because we have the best education, we have the best doctors, we have new medication coming out and vaccines, and yet we're getting sicker every year. So something is up here. And here, of course, America is by far, the most expensive healthcare system, because the money, to pay $4.7 trillion has to come from somewhere. And if you're wondering, why your premium goes up every year, this is the reason why. Followed by Germany, Sweden, Canada, France, and so on. All right, so let me repeat that, 75% of Americans have at least one chronic disease. That's 6 in 10 adults have at least one chronic disease. 4 in 10 have multiple chronic diseases. So if you ever asked yourself, why was America, why did it have the most COVID death? It's because of this. So many people already had multiple chronic diseases, and it didn't take much for a virus to come along and knock them out. And 70% of all deaths in America is caused because of chronic diseases. And the leading cause of all chronic diseases in America, as you might know, is heart disease, and cancer, followed by stroke, diabetes, chronic respiratory diseases, and so on. And here on the left, can see from from the 90s, to 2015, you can see here in yellow is arthritis. Arthritis is skyrocketing, which is basically inflammation of the joints, which is caused mainly by, from sugar. The sugar consumption inflames the joints, gets the stiffness, and creates the pain, years after years. Then in purple, we have diabetes. The diabetes right now in the last few years is just skyrocketing. But also, let me tell you, like pre-diabetic and type 2 diabetes is one of the easiest, to heal within, I would say, less than 2 months, just by nutrition and lifestyle. And then in green, we see cancer is rising. And by the way, since 2020, we have $1.5 million new cancer cases every single year. And then in gray, you see heart attack and stroke and so on. And the healthcare spending on chronic diseases, 90% of all the healthcare spending we spend on chronic diseases. We spend $4 trillion a year. And as you can imagine, that's a huge financial burden on our financial system. For the first time in history, America is also, we have the sickest children. And some of the chronic conditions very common these days is ADHD. 1 in 9 kids today have ADHD, and it's rising year after year. We have 15 million children are obese. I'm not talking about, a little bit overweight like I used to be. I'm talking about morbidly obese. And then the child mortality also is going up every year. I mean, this is the data from 2022. 3.1% in infant death. That shouldn't even happen, right? And then 12% increase between 1 and 4, and 7% increase between 5 and 14. As you can imagine, the FDA, the government, there's a lot of pressure, because why do we have the sickest children? Why do children, in such a young age dying? Well, the FDA had a lot of pressure, and they had to come up with a solution. You would think they would educate the parents and the children about lifestyle nutrition. Nope, they teamed up with Big Pharma, and this is mind-blowing for me. They approved statin drugs for children. This just happened, this year. Okay, let me explain what that means, statin drugs for children. Cholesterol-lowering drugs, what they do, they're important. Cholesterol is essential for life. It gets so demonized, for heart attacks, but we know, now that is not the truth or the full truth. Cholesterol is essential for healthy brain function. Your brain needs cholesterol for memory and for new tasks. 60% of your brain is made out of fat. It's the fattiest organ, in the body. And 30% out of that is cholesterol. So I would think that cholesterol might be important. And also think about it this way. Your first nutrition you consume as an infant is, cholesterol. It's fatty acids and stuff from the mother milk. There's a lot of cholesterol in there. And it's important for hormone function and for brain function. I can actually give you a perfect example. One of my patients, his doctor convinced him to get on statin drugs. Even though I told him, it's not needed, but, he got convinced. And so he was on it for 2 weeks, and every day he goes on his walk, around the block. But one day he didn't return. And so the wife was all concerned, oh my God, he's always coming back after like an hour, what's happened to him? So they called the cops, they were looking for him. And sure enough, 2 hours later, they found him wandering around. He had complete memory loss, complete amnesia. He didn't know his own name, he couldn't recognize his wife, and he had no clue where he was. And then after he got off, after a few days, then his memory slowly came back. But believe me, he's not going to take the statin drugs anymore. And then we have Ozempic for children. I'm sure you guys know semaglutide, Ozempic, which is very common for weight loss. But most people don't know it's a peptide, and how does it work? Well, the way it works is it slows down the gastric emptying. So in other words, the food stays in your stomach, for much longer. But the problem with that is, imagine our entire digestive system from our mouth down to the anus is 35 feet, long. So it's like a long tube, and each section has, is timed, and it's like a conveyor belt, right? Each section has its job. And when the food stays in the stomach for too long, what can happen is that the nutrients get destroyed, because we have hydrochloric acid in the stomach, and if the timing is off and it stays in the acid for too long, then some of the nutrients get destroyed, and you have nutrient deficiency, and also bad breath. And then a new study just came out about Ozempic. That was interesting. They just found out for every pound on Ozempic you lose, 1/3 is fat and 2/3 is muscles. And when you Google Ozempic face, you can see that it's like the death face, right? Because they don't lose just fat, they also lose a lot of muscles in the face and they look like they're dying. Now, again, I'm not demonizing it. If somebody's 300 or 400 pounds and that's the only choice, sure, go for it. But for somebody that wants to just lose 20 pounds or 30 pounds, no, absolutely not. And for kids in the development, absolutely not. And then, of course, to make it even worse, the FDA approved gastric bypass surgery for obese children, which means, make a small incision to the stomach, they put a band around the stomach, shrink it, and then, of course, automatically you're going to eat less. And again, I keep repeating myself, all this can be completely avoided by just education about nutrition. And now it's getting serious. Construction worker and the suicide rate. So you're 10 times higher, as a male construction worker to commit suicide versus the general population. And a lot of that can contribute to a lot of things, but one of the main things is poor nutrition, substance abuse, stress, and job insecurity. Poor nutrition is 100% truth. I witnessed it myself. I know it. I saw it. And substance abuse, that falls under alcohol, cigarettes, painkillers, amphetamines, because the work is hard, so they like to take Adderall to have extra energy, or real amphetamine. And also the stress, because in construction, everything has to be, timed, has to be done on a certain, projects, and job insecurity. I saw that with my dad, if the construction firm he's working with, if they haven't gotten a new contract, sometimes temporarily, he got laid off. Or in the winter in Austria, construction workers don't work for like 2-3, months. But we have government support, that helps, because in the winter when it snows, you can't really work. So working days are lost in the industry each year due to mental health. Let me ask you a question. Do you think a construction worker, who works in construction? Like a real man, right? Big ego, and it's like, of course, I'm not gonna, the tough guys, right? Do you think they would actually ask for help if they have, any mental, issues? I can only bring up the example of my dad, my uncle, my grandpa. Hell no. They're so stubborn. They would never, my dad is the perfect example. He would rather slowly die before he would admit that there's something wrong with him. And if my dad, is like that, I can only imagine many construction workers feel the same way. Instead of asking for help, they're just being stubborn. And then if it gets to a point where there's no way to return, they might do something they shouldn't have done. But we're going to get to this more. All right, so who is to blame, for all this? Well, let's look at the chemicals in our food here in America. We have additives, preservatives, which, that's an old saying. The longer the shelf life of a product, the shorter is yours. And it is absolutely true. And then also we have artificial sweetener. Artificial sweeteners are linked to, microbiome disruption. It messes up your microbiome, and and we already know that the microbiome is super important. You cannot have an unhealthy, gut and a healthy brain. That's impossible. In Chinese medicine, we have seen the brain and the gut as one organ. Those, I call them the pets, the microbes that live in your gut. We have like about 3 pounds, trillions of them living in there. They directly communicate with the brain. And that is not an analogy, right? They literally, through the spinal cord, directly talk to your brain. And they can influence, your emotions, the way you feel, and even decision making. And then colorants, the color is important when it comes to, buying food, especially when it comes to, processed food. They're all bright colors, which attracts. Here in America, we use red 40, yellow 20, and all those stuff, right, to make it really bright. I'm not sure if you guys have been following, with Casey Means and Kennedy. They're actually exposing all this stuff now, which is, I was waiting for this moment for so long. Because the same company, Kellogg's as an example, they're under big pressure right now. Kellogg's uses the same products they sell in Canada and in Europe. The only difference here in America, we use all those freaking, chemicals, colors. And over there, they use sweet potato for coloring, carrot juice, beet juice, and so on. And America is now asking to get the same treatment. And then we have emulsifiers, which is a group of chemicals that is important, to bind products. As an example, if it's a product that is, let's say, water-based or oil-based, water and oil doesn't mix well. But don't worry about that. Don't worry about it. We got chemicals. It makes it perfectly. And it is interesting. Herbicides. I wrote this one down in particular. Herbicide called estrogen. Estrogen is widely used in Europe, but a lot here in America. So they did some testing to see if that pesticides, herbicides, insecticides have an impact on hormone production. What happens? So they took frogs and they exposed the frogs to the herbicide, estrogen. And it castrated male frogs, and in some cases, it turned a male frog to a female frog. And you can look up the study here when you Google it. That was mind-blowing. So I think it's safe to say, what do you think is going to happen to us humans when we consume all those chemicals and we get exposed to this year after year? Could that be an answer, why, transgenderism is on the rise? I'm sure it's one of, many reasons. If that can happen to animals, then eventually, it can also happen to us. And then some stats. So here in America, we have way over 10,000 chemicals, pesticides, and they're all deemed to be safe by our regulatory agencies. To put that in perspective, in Europe, we have less than 400 chemicals that are allowed. And what is the difference? How come in America we have so many? Well, here in America, we have something that's called a single dose toxicity. As an example, if you get exposed to a single dose of whatever, some toxin, and you don't show any side effects or like allergic reaction to it, then it's deemed to be safe and we can use it for our food supply. In Europe, we have accumulative toxicity. So you might not show any reaction on day 1 or day 2 or day 3, but after 10 days getting exposed to the same chemical, all of a sudden you show a reaction. So it's considered then toxin and it's not allowed in the food supply. And that's why in America we have so many chemicals and in Europe only 400. And 90% of our crops in America are genetically modified. They're known as GMO, corn, soybeans, canola, cotton, sugar beets, alfalfa, potatoes, apples, and so on. And you might say, yeah, but in America they said that GMO is fine, there's no side effects. All right, then why is it illegal in Europe, and in Russia you go to jail for 20 years? So there must be something, right? And here's why. They did a study in the United States with genetically modified crops and fed them to the rats. The study only went on for 3 months. After 3 months, there were no real side effects, no tumor growing, nothing. However, the same study has been conducted in France. That study went on for 2 years. And after 9 months and 12 months, all their rats had tumors growing the size of tennis balls. That's why it's illegal all over in Europe, but it's fine here. And some of the chemicals, we use daily, the MSG, I would say 80% of the restaurants use MSG. It's like an enhancer. It makes taste everything better, especially if you go to Vegas and buffet, they have tons of it on it. And then artificial coloring, like we talk about it, just think about, in the animal kingdom, the bees, right? They get attracted by the bright colors of the flower. Us humans, we're the same, red, yellow. That's why McDonald's has yellow and red, because studies have shown it attracts and reminds you to eat. So all the coloring is not just random colors. There's actually a lot of studies behind it. And then high fructose corn syrup. All right, so here, I have something to say about sugar. In my opinion, sugar is not for human consumption, period. And here's why. Thousands of years ago, we never had sugar. The only sugar that we were exposed to was, through fruits and stuff like that. But we never were exposed to like high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is sugar on steroids. We already have a hard time, processing regular sugar. So what do you think is going to happen with sugar on steroids? And on top of that, high fructose corn syrup is made out of GMO corn. So you also get, genetically modified on top of that. But it's very cheap and it's very effective. And let me show you what happens when you consume sugar. Let's say this is your blood glucose. When it comes to health and longevity, blood glucose is all about, low to medium. This is considered healthy and also like for longevity. However, every time you eat something, I don't know, ice cream, chocolate, anything that raises your blood glucose, it shoots up. Everything that shoots up eventually has to come down. And when it comes down below base level. And that's when you have cravings. That's when you feel dizzy. That's when you have like, your lips getting all like numb and everything. And if you have that, congratulations, you actually have food addiction. You're addicted to sugar. And speaking of sugar, did you know that sugar is 8 times more addictive than cocaine? There was another famous study with rats. They had 20 rats locked up in a cage with sugar water and 20 rats locked up with cocaine water. They left them in there for a few days, and then they combined them and offered both options. And guess what happened? Only 2 rats went for the cocaine water. So that should tell you something. All right, and then we have potato chips, also full of chemicals and processed food, but they have trans fat. Trans fat, we took off the market because it caused so many major heart disease and heart issues. However, it's still, if you look at the package, right, the fat and the trans fat, they are, depending on the product, but the amount is based on like 6 or 5 chips. But let's face it, there's no way when you start eating chips, you only eat like 5 or 6. You kill the entire bag. And then you will have an overload of trans fat. And then oils. When it comes to oils, there's some really healthy ones and there's some really bad ones. The healthy ones are coconut oil, which you can use for cooking, which is saturated fat. Every oil that's solid in room temperature, that's oil you can cook with. Liquid oils you cannot cook with. You can, but you destroying the structure and it becomes rancid. And then olive oil, and then the most important one is fish oil. Omega-3 fatty acids is the most important one. Even our brain, is made out of that too. And then avocado is like so, depending on the company and how they process it. But those are the healthy ones, and also flaxseed oil. However, the vegetable oils, if you just Google, how they process vegetable oils, especially canola and stuff like that, they have omega-3, 6 fatty acids. And if you get exposed to too much of the omega-6 fatty acids, you can cause inflammation, and inflammation is the first stepping stone to chronic disease and many other issues. And it also speeds up the aging process. And the way they process them, it becomes like a really thick, paste, that those oils, and they have to use like really aggressive chemicals to liquefy it, and that's what we cook with. And then soda, again, they have all the artificial sweetener that messes up your gut microbiome, and that directly affects your brain too. But we'll get to this more.
Real quick question, what is it on the yogurt side? Yeah, that noted there. What is the types of yogurt that you're referencing?
When it comes to yogurts, again, so if you read the label, you will notice one thing. Either it says non-fat yogurt, then that means the sugar content is high. If it says high fat or regular fat content, then there's no sugar. Because the only taste we have in our food is either sugar or fat. But let me tell you, you always should go for the regular high fat or normal fat, because the sugar is really the culprit of a lot of the issue we have these days. All right, the health risks of the food chemicals we have. We know, some of the physical health, it can cause cancer, hormone disruption. We know even that from studies with the frogs and stuff. And then obesity. Mental health, we also know those chemicals, the chemical cocktail, causes depression, anxiety, ADHD symptoms, and I mentioned here the MTHFR gene mutation. Here's why. Have you heard about the MTHFR gene mutation? It's the most common gene mutation. 44% of our nation have the gene mutation. So there's a 50-50 chance that you or the person next to you has it. You have it. And so what does it mean? To explain it in simple terms, those genes, those are 5 genes, they're responsible for converting the nutrients in a usable form. Nothing that goes through your mouth is used in the form you eat it. Everything gets converted. As an example, if I take the crude oil out of the ground and I put that in the gas tank, the car can do nothing with it, right? It needs to be refined. And the refinery in humans is called methylation. And those genes are responsible for that. And if you have the gene mutation and it's not working at all, or working like half the time, depending how bad your gene mutation is, either you got it from your mom or from your dad or from both, That means you cannot convert some of the essential nutrients. One of the most important one is folic acid. And I challenge you, when you go home and you have some vitamins at home or something, look if you have folic acid in there. Folic acid is the synthetic form of methylfolate. You cannot find it anywhere in nature. It's made in the lab. And if you have the gene mutation, you cannot convert folic acid to methylfolate. And when that happens, you have nutrient deficiency, because methylfolate is the most important nutrient for DNA methylation. And what happens is, with people that have that gene mutation, I actually can give you another life example with one of my patients. That family came to me, was like 5 months ago. The kid, every morning, the kid would eat breakfast, cereal and orange juice, which, by the way, here in America, we spray everything with folic acid. Got exposed to folic acid. The kid was like on cocaine, like couldn't focus, all over the place. And sure enough, make a long story short, they went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Oh, of course, the kid has ADHD. Here, take the drugs." But she was like hesitant, and she didn't want to give the kid the drugs. And so what happened was, make a long story short, one day they were running late for school, and thank God she did. Otherwise, she would have never found out. And the kid couldn't eat breakfast. And the mom noticed, the kid is normal today. She's not all over the place. It seems calm and focused. What was different? Oh yeah, the kid didn't eat breakfast. And so they got referred to me. Sure enough, we did the gene test, and the kid had the gene completely broken. And so every time the kid was getting exposed to folic acid, it was like cocaine for that kid. And so we had to remove all the fortified foods, because here in America, all the grains, everything is sprayed with, if it says fortified or enriched, and you have the gene mutation, you're in trouble. And it's affecting the kids even more, for the mental part. So we just exchanged everything for organic food. We had to give the kid, certain supplements that are already methylated, because she cannot make the conversion. So you give the methylated form that's already converted, and boom, less than 2 weeks, the kid was back to normal without any drugs. And then gut health. Yeah, so we know that those additives mess up your microbiome and cause inflammation. And addiction. Yeah, sugar and fat. The chemical cocktail, right, between sugar, high sodium, and fat, and some of the chemicals get you hooked. And I don't mean that, I literally mean get you hooked. It releases your dopamine. It hits the dopamine receptor in the same way as, cocaine, cigarettes, alcohol. And so every time you eat that stuff, you can see that in people, especially in the office, when they eat a donut or some sugar, they're like hyper, hey, how you doing? They're happy. And then 40 minutes later, it's like, oh, they're like in a bad mood. That is not a coincidence. This is because of the, somebody in here? That is because of the dopamine release. We'll talk about this in a little bit more. But every time your dopamine gets released, you feel good. And everything that goes up eventually has to come down. And then you have those mood swings in people. All right, and now it gets interesting. So I'm sure at this point you ask yourself, but how do we know all this? And why are we allowing it if we know, it causes all those health issues? Well, here's your answer. In the 80s, tobacco companies like Archer Randall's and Philip Morris, in the 80s, when the government was going after cigarette companies, right? A lot of people listened to the government for once, and they stopped smoking. So those cigarette companies, lost a lot of money. So they had to come up with something. So they bought all the processed food companies. One of them I can mention is Kraft. And so what they did was they took the same scientists, that got you hooked with a chemical cocktail in cigarettes, and applied the same principle to food. And let me tell you, they did a fantastic job. And the lobbying power, there's something people don't think about. The lobbying power, from the food industry, they spend 5 times more than the oil industry. Now think about that. And they paid off the FDA, the USDA, and all the academic institutions to overlook the harmful effects. The reason why we know that is because Casey Means, who's, by the way, working with Kennedy right now, he was exposing everything the last 6 months because he was working for the food companies. He was the one doing the work. And then, he said, I have enough. And he became a whistleblower. And so we know they get paid off. But we don't even have to have a whistleblower. We know they got paid off by looking at the food pyramid. This is the food pyramid of 2024. Now, they recommend everything in green to eat the most. Can anybody tell me what they all have in common? Besides the kale? They have all tons of sugar, and everything is processed. Now, this is not a food pyramid for health. This is advertising for those food companies, because that is there's no way those institutions or those Harvard professors, right, those nutrition expert, that they would agree to put this up. When that came out at the beginning of the year, every influencer, people could not believe it. I mean, you don't even have to be a nutritionist or anything to see what's wrong with that. Watermelon, high in sugar. Kale, I guess they just threw in something healthy, but people think it's healthy, but it's actually not. Because kale has a lot of oxalates, and kale, if you eat it every day, causes joint pain because it starts, crystallizing, and yeah, and stuff to process. I mean, a horse doesn't even kale. I should say something. And then frosted mini wheats, unsweetened almond milk, sugar, folic acid, non-fat frozen yogurt. We already was non-fat means a lot of sugar. Chocolate covered almonds, again, why not just almonds? No, it has to be with sugar. Orange juice, again, folic acid. Honey nut Cheerios, date. Okay, date is natural, but it has the higher sugar content from all the fruits, especially when it's dried. And then, moderate intake. At first, I thought it was sweet potatoes. So I was like, oh yeah, and I was like, oh no, it's fried chips with potatoes. I mean, everything here is insane. Everything here is ultra processed. All those companies, make those kind of food, and that's why it's on that, food pyramid. I mean, I can go on and on. I mean, the only one I agree with is skinless chicken, but if anything, they should be on top. And ground beef is, on the bottom. When it comes to meat, I mean, it has to be grass-fed, pasture raised, for me to eat it or to be healthy. But that should be up in the green. And then again, whole wheat bread. When it comes to bread, well, it depends. Most of the bread, have also chemicals, and some of them bread even have sugar. So if it's more the expensive bread, well, it depends on your genetic makeup. A lot of people have, issues with wheat products. I mean, I personally don't eat any wheat products because it doesn't go well with me. And then, canned pineapple in heavy syrup. I mean, I think you get the point. I mean, this is the result of lobbying power, paying off politicians, paying off, institution to make this public is absolutely insane. The food we eat, how it's affecting our brain. Well, the gut-brain axis, like we said before, the gut is the soil where the brain grows. So when your gut is messed up, you have, to a certain degree, you have mental issues. I mean, it's impossible to have an unhealthy gut and a fully functioning brain. Impossible. And fluoride. Did you know that fluoride, lowers IQ? Hitler was using that, in Germany to dumb down the society so that he can do his plan. And funny enough, they're doing it here too. And it's also affecting your memory and impacts your thyroid. And by the way, here in America, we also have a pandemic of thyroid, low thyroid. I mean, there's other issues too. It's also because, we're so nutrient depleted, and the body makes about 80% of T4. And then again, it comes to methylation, and then it gets methylated with the help of some minerals to T3, the active form. And if those minerals are not given, you cannot make the conversion. Some of like iron, iodine, zinc, and so on. And iodine you cannot find these days no more in our food supply, like super rare. And then you go to a doctor, with low thyroid function, and they just give you an active form, a synthetic one, and send you home. And it would be an easy fix to just take a supplement with some zinc, iodine, and stuff, so the body can make the conversion. And then sugar. Yeah, like we said, sugar causes those mood swings. Every time your sugar shoots up and it comes down below base level, you feel, moody. You feel like a little sick. You get the numbness in the face. You get the tingly. You get dizzy. And then you eat a little bit of sugar and you feel fine. If you have that, you literally have food addiction. And then memory issue, depression, and it depletes minerals and vitamins. That's an interesting one. So around Christmas time, around the holidays, why do so many people get sick? Does anybody know? Well, there you go. He knows. My mom used to tell me, "Oh, it's because it's getting cold." I'm like, well, if that would be the case, and every time I go in a cold plunge, I would be super sick. But it's actually quite the opposite. No, like you said, it is sugar. Sugar, every time you eat something, like anything with sugar, for the next 4 to 5 hours, your immune system is suppressed by about 40%. And so let's say holidays are around, you eat a lot of sugar, and then you go in the gym. And you get exposed to any diseased microorganism, which could be a bacteria, virus, or anything, right? Usually it wouldn't affect you because you have a fully functioning immune system. You wouldn't even notice it. However, now because the last 2 days, 3 days, you were home with the family, munching all the sugar, and now it's hitting you, and you get sick. And also on top of that, sugar also depletes some of the essential minerals and vitamins. The very same vitamins and minerals your immune system needs to fully function. Sugar leaches onto them and depletes it. The chromium, the magnesium, the zinc, and so on. So and to make it even worse, and I'm not making this up, sugar ages you 7 times quicker. And here's why. I give example, that's always good to remember. Imagine you go to a steakhouse, right? It's like steak is healthy, everything is good. And then the waitress comes up to you and she goes, "Oh, can I offer you guys a dessert?" And you're like, "I eat healthy all day. Yeah, let's bring you a dessert." And so now what happens is you have the protein and the fats from the steak in the bloodstream. But when the sugar comes into the play, it binds to the proteins and to those fats, and it starts glycating. It's called the glycation process, and it creates AGEs, advanced glycation end products. To explain in an easy way, those particles like crystallize and get deposited into your skin, and it breaks down the collagen and the elastin. So if you ever seen, some individuals that have really like sagging skin, and their excuse is, "Oh, it's my bad genetics." No, there is no gene that drops your skin. It's called glycation. It literally breaks the collagen. I even had 2 clients who were the same age, 60 years old. One consumed tons of sugar, the other one consumed no sugar at all. And the differences in skin was like day and night. The 60-year-old with no sugar, sure, she had some wrinkles, but the skin was still tight. And the other one was hanging like a turtle. And that's, from the sugar. And then trans fat, that causes, inflammation of the brain and also reduces neuroplasticity. Having a plastic brain, what that means is, having a brain that's adaptable. Every time you learn a new task, your brain, creates new connection. And when you expose to a lot of trans fat, you will have a hard time memorizing a new task because it can't, create those new connections. And then processed carbs. Processed carbs can be in many forms, with like sugar, high glycemic carbs, white bread, white potato, white pasta. They're all considered high glycemic. Anything that shoots up your insulin and drives up the glucose is considered high glycemic index. And they hit the dopamine receptor, as we said before. And if you eat sugar every single day throughout the day, years after years, it's the same. It's the same when you do, I don't know, any kind of drug. If you do it every day, eventually your dopamine and your serotonin are going to be depleted. And it doesn't matter how much you take, you never get that same, kick, right? And it's the same with the sugar. We eat more and more and more of that stuff because we want to get the rewarding feeling, the good feeling, but it's not coming. And so we consume tons of calories, over time, trying to get that dopamine hit, but it's not coming. And that's another thing I want to mention, that you can eat 10,000 calories of unhealthy food and you'll still have cravings. And how is that possible? You can eat 1,500 calories, take all your vitamins and supplements, all the nutrition your body needs. You will have no cravings. It's going to leave you alone. It's almost like having a good or a bad marriage. If you keep your little animals, you've got bacteria happy. If you give them what they need, they'll leave you alone. But if not, well, you know what's happening. That's a whole nother session. Yeah, like I cannot tell you the last time I had food cravings. I really have no idea. And I don't, you might think I eat a lot. I actually don't. I eat below 2,000 calories. I only eat once or twice a day. Not sometimes three, but never more than that. And then where were we? And then the artificial sweetener. Yeah, they mess up your, your gut, and they also help with anxiety and stuff. So there's a big difference between, sodium that's in processed food or like real high quality salt. Sodium, doesn't have minerals, doesn't have any real nutrients, but it retains water and drives up the blood pressure. But you can take the same amount of salt from Celtic salt or Baja salt or Himalaya salt, and it actually helps with low blood pressure because they have so many minerals in there, and the body needs all the minerals for all the functions. Keep in mind that every time you put something in your mouth, there will be, tons of chemical reactions. You might be, aware of it, but there's a lot happening internally. And and the combination of the chemical cocktail and the salt and the sugar and the chemicals, right? It, causes hormone imbalance, and it elevates the stress hormone cortisol. Now, cortisol is important because it wakes you up in the morning. In the morning, cortisol is high, and then during the day, it slowly, tapers down. And if you get exposed to all those, food chemicals throughout the day, your cortisol stays high. And then you have a hard time falling asleep. You cannot shut down the body. You cannot rest. And and the suicide risks, it's all linked to depression. So imagine all the chemicals combined, with the stress, with everything combined. Let me explain it this way. Let's say person B is consuming all the processed food and all those chemicals years over years, right? And person A is always eating whole foods and healthy. And let's just say both individuals get exposed to the same stressor. It might be losing a job, might be, going into divorce, whatever it might be. There's a huge difference on how each person will react to the same stressor. I can guarantee you, that person that eats unhealthy because their brain is already, negatively infected by it, right? It's not functioning 100%. That person will not be able to deal with that stress. It's affecting that person 10 times worse. And if they don't see no way out and they talk to anybody, they will commit suicide. Person A gets exposed to the same stressor. And by the way, I know that because I used to be person A. Trust me, I went through like hard times. But thank God I was eating healthy and it didn't affect me as bad. Even though I couldn't see a way out, if you have a healthy brain, it doesn't let you commit suicide. I've never seen it before. If your brain is fully functioning, if you have a healthy gut, you do not commit suicide. The brain doesn't let you. And that is the difference between eating healthy, whole foods, and eating junk food. It could be the same stressor with very different outcome. All this negative, what is the solution here? Well, it's actually not as difficult as you think you are. It is. Let's start with fasting. Fasting, intermittent fasting. I mean, at some point, I guess all of you, fasted for a little bit. Every religious text, talks about fasting. But when I was a little kid, and my parents said, "Oh, you got to fast," I'm like, but why? And they could never give me an answer. And I'm somebody, I can do it, but I just need to know why and what's the benefit. And so I didn't do it because I never knew the benefit, and now I'm doing it every day. It's actually fascinating that back then they already knew all that. So what happens when you fast? I'll give you another fun analogy. Imagine you're buying a new car, and the minute you leave the shop and you drive around and you go home, you park the car, but you never turn off the engine. It's always running. I think after a year or 2 years, never shutting off the engine, I think it's fair to say that the longevity of the car is probably going down quite a bit, right? Or you need to replace some parts. And so then why are we doing that with our body? Because our gut is like an engine. And if it never gets a break, you will have insulin resistance and many other issues. That's something we don't think about. The biggest stressor we put on our body every single day is eating. I mean, think about it. A chicken or an apple, it takes a lot of energy to break that chicken down to the smallest, tiniest particles we can't even see with our naked eye, to amino acids, or the apple is glucose, and it leaches out the minerals and the vitamins. So it takes a lot of energy to process that, and get it into the cells, and whatever is not needed, gets released. When you're sick, when you're home with the flu, are you hungry? Do you feel like, oh, when I'm sick, oh, I can't wait to eat? No, you're not, because the body shuts down the ghrelin hormone. The ghrelin hormone is reminding you, to eat. It's like, hey, we need energy, start eating. But when you're sick, you're not, and that's for a simple reason, because your body is protecting you, to heal. Every time you're sick and you're not hungry, you should never force feed yourself, or even your kids, because the body is using all that energy to heal you, to fix you. Now, if you would start eating because you think, oh, I need to eat some chicken soup or something, then you take energy away from the healing process, and now the body has to digest it. My mom always used to tell me, oh, you got to eat some soup, so you get healthy better. Yeah, it's actually quite the opposite. And also fasting, if you want to burn fat, like fasting, I think that's what the name is coming from. Fasting, it's the fastest way. Because what is fat? Fat is nothing else than stored energy. It's like a battery, right? And only if the demand of energy succeeds the calories you consume, the body will take it from here. Or, much, much easier, if you're in a fasted state, if you get up in the morning, you have a black coffee, whatever you do, don't raise your blood glucose. Then everything you do, it doesn't matter if you just walk or go to the bathroom or go in the gym, the body is using fat as fuel at that very moment. The minute you start, eat just one candy, it's over. Then the body turns to glucose. Once this food is present in the body will always go for glucose first and will ignore, the fat, because it's only for emergency purposes.
Why is coffee okay?
Because it doesn't have any calories and it doesn't spike your glucose.
Yeah,
like
people do that. They'll drink the black coffee.
Yeah, black coffee is fine. Tea is fine too. Anything with no calories is fine. But the minute you add a little bit of creamer, a little bit of sugar, it's already over. And also, you should fast at least. I mean, I haven't even eaten today, and it's like what, 3-4 o'clock. And so I always, fast at least like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, sometimes less, sometimes more. It doesn't have to be the same every day. You just go by how you feel. But I never eat in the morning. I'm not even hungry anymore. I've been doing that for so long that like I needed to force feed myself. I'm already, my circadian rhythm is already so set, I couldn't even eat in the morning anymore. And if you want to switch to that, right, the easiest way, is to start with bulletproof coffee. You have coffee, you put some, MCT oil and some grass-fed butter, blend it and drink it. Fat is the only nutrient that doesn't affect your glucose. So even if you consume fat, yes, it has calories, but at least it doesn't drive the blood sugar up. And the easiest way to start is have a little bit of coffee with some fats in there, black, no sugar, drink it, and then it's much, much easier, because it takes about 7 hours or so till the fat gets broken down, so it keeps you satiated for a long time. And that's the easiest way to start fasting. And and then eat whole foods. Everything should be whole foods, organic, and pasture-raised, grass-fed options. I mean, I'm not touching anything that's not grass-fed or pasture-raised. I mean, for the very same reason. And I think the more you know about nutrition and the food chemicals, the less you can eat. Like the only section in the supermarket, is like on the outside where we're shopping. And have you even thought about that? Why do we have a healthcare section in the supermarket? If there's a healthcare section, then what is all the other shit? I mean, that should tell you something too. And then supplements. If we would have this discussion 50 years ago, I wouldn't even mention that, supplements, because the nutrients, from the 60s to now, they're so depleted. They did studies on an apple. Apples from the 60s, they compared the nutrient content, compared to now, it's 55% less, 53 or 55. And so you would have to consume, like 5, 6 apples just to get to the same amount of nutrients from one apple from 50 years ago. And of course, you're not going to eat that many apples because there's all the calories and sugar. However, if you do a supplement, that's enough. But when it comes to supplements, we tend to always go for the best price when it comes to supplements. But that's, I have a supplement company myself, so I know firsthand how it works. Now I tell you, when it comes to supplements, spend a little extra, get the high quality. There is the synthetic version of the supplements, like we discussed before, the folic acid. But for the same price, you can get methylfolate. So why would you get the synthetic one? And I'll give you another example. B12. B12 is very common. It's a must for the body, and you can find it in every supplement, everywhere, every protein bar, all the protein bars and everything. When you go home and you have a supplement, look on the label and what it says. Does it say B12 methylcobalamin or does it say B12 cyanocobalamin? If it says cyanocobalamin, it's made out of cyanide. It's a cyanide-based, B12. I'm talking about the same cyanide we use for chemical weapons. However, they say, well, it seemed to be safe because it's such a minimum amount and stuff. Well, but they also said that about all our chemicals, and yet we're the sickest nation in the world, have the sickest children. And go for the methylcobalamin. It's already methylated, it's already converted, and that's the natural form. And also, if you would see how they make, B12 from other cyanocobalamin, you wouldn't even believe it when I say it. All right, so in the sewage, right, when the water comes in and it creates the foam, that sludge, the brown sludge, that is your B12. That sludge ends up in your supplement. They scrape it off, dry it, clean it, and it becomes your powder. That's how they produce, B12. And that's what I mean. Supplements can be super healthy, but you need to know the brand. You need to know which kind. You can't just take any supplements and accept a great outcome. That's not how it works. And then lifestyle changes. Spend time in the sun, get some vitamin D, and it's healthy for methylation. Caroline.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. And healthy methylation. So what is methylation? A good analogy is to understand it, which is easy, right? Imagine we have millions of traffic lights in our body. And it doesn't matter how many cars there are in the intersection. If the traffic light works, it can regulate the traffic, right? It can detox the body, the hormone production, everything works. However, what happens when there's green on both sides? Boom, now everything crashes and slows down. And that is, the methylation in the body. And when you go in the sun, or you take methylated B vitamins, that helps your methylation. That's why you feel good after going in the sun. And then incorporates, some cardio for healthy heart, weightlifting for strength, for strengthening, for bones. And then sports, you can do tennis or soccer or anything, for social connection. Because we know that being social, we're social creatures. And that is because there's epigenetics. Have you heard about epigenetics? All right, so 20% of our genes are set in stone, which means 20% of the genes make up who you are. The hair color, the height, the way you look, and everything. You cannot change that. However, we found out that 80% is epigenetics. And that's why, anti-aging, longevity is working so well, because we discovered that we can influence those 80%. It responds to love, community, having a great social life, having a positive outcome, nutrition, supplements. And that's why 80% of how fast you age, on how fast you get age-related diseases, is literally in your hands. And that's why you see some people, let's say they're 40 years old, they look like they're 50, and you look at this guy, 40 years old, it looks like he's 30. And that all actually came out with twins. A quick story. They didn't know of each other. One twin was growing up out in the field, in a farm, and one, in the city. And when they found out that they had a twin and they came together, everybody's like, what the, why? They're so, one was like balding, the other one had hair, and one looked like 15 years older. And they're like, how is that possible? Well, we know now that epigenetics, and how fast you age, and how you treat your body is up in your hands. And That was the perfect example with twins because they're genetically identical. They have the same gene, 100%, but one ages quicker and one ages slower, and that's where the epigenetic comes in, and that's why longevity and anti-aging, works so well. But that's another topic. Yeah, and then stress reduction. Practice mindful techniques. Do meditation, some yoga, and breathing technique. Also important. There's an old saying: the more oxygen, the presence of oxygen is the absence of all diseases. When I have my cancer patients and I put them through the program, one of the main program is always oxygen. The more oxygen you have in your body, the healthier you are. And here's why. Cancer or any diseased microorganism, right? They hate oxygen. They're like in a toxic area. However, our healthy, the good bacteria, they love oxygen. They can proliferate. So when you do therapies like hydrogen peroxide therapy, but it's not the hydrogen peroxide you can buy in the store, it's a different one. Don't try it at home. And and then ozone or the chamber, the hyperbaric chamber, exposed to more oxygen, you fight off, all the diseases. And there's many studies that have shown that. I healed a cancer patient from stage 3 lung cancer. He had 3 lumps going almost to stage 4. And within 14 months, he was, pretty much cancer-free. And one of the main treatments is the oxygen, treatment, lifestyle changes, nutrition supplements, and everything. But it's also because of the oxygen. The more oxygen you get into your body, the better the body can, fight everything off. All right, I guess we covered everything. If you guys have any questions.